All right, today's Sunday. I had heard that Megan Fox had put a video up about a young fellow out there that had a run-in with Mr. Cook, and that apparently there was a little shenanigans going on there. Kind of took me by surprise because he's the one that I had called out in a video some time ago, and then the next day I put up a video telling everybody I was going to eat crow because his record was so old, and that maybe I jumped a little bit too quick. Whew. Looks like he was what I thought he was, and that long history that he had prior to that incident with Mr. Cook may have been something that was ingrained to him to this day, apparently. A few people got scammed, including myself, if you really want to come down to it, because I was quick to judge him and quick to say I was wrong. Oh, man. I feel a little foolish after going on there and admitting I was wrong when I actually wasn't. I got fooled twice in a row. They tell you, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And that's the correct way to say that saying, by the way. Not like some others out there that don't know how it goes. I wasn't exactly happy either way, either time, either this time or last time about it. Because I usually try to take a little time and think things out a little bit. You'd think somebody my age would know better than to jump to conclusions. And, this whole thing stinks. And I'm going to try to give you some of the clues why I think it stinks. And I still don't know the whole truth about the matter. And I'm not so sure anybody else does at this point. But I will tell you this. It sounded like Megan did quite a bit of look at it. She's made some pretty good guesses at it. I don't necessarily agree with what she's saying about it. My spin is a little different because I'm old, but I've dealt with a lot of people, and I can kind of tell when they're telling me the truth or telling a story. And yes, I know Wes's story and this woman's story that came forward are pretty similar, although not 100%. And I also know that she went to the officers that were involved in the investigation, it would be the sheriff's department, and wanted to give her story. She seems to think she was brushed off, and I'm not so sure that's really the case. These guys, when they first started to investigate this thing out there in Otter Creek, the woman didn't want to cooperate with them in any way. And a matter of fact, she told them she didn't want them to look at her license plates. Now, these guys were investigating a felony. And the guy that was making the charges had been driving the car. And they have every right, and they would have probably got chewed out if they didn't run the plate on it. Although this woman didn't want to run for whatever reason, she didn't want her name associated with this plate. That's suspicious in itself, and as an officer, I certainly would have went in there to look this thing up. I guarantee you that. She just didn't want to be a part of it at all at that point. And she said she was so scared that it scared her that bad that she didn't want her name brought up because she was afraid of repercussions or whatever it was. Now, I wasn't there, so I can't tell you what happened. But when I put all the pieces of the puzzle together, I've got a good idea. You know, a criminal usually don't change their spots. Most of them that have been in prison return to prison somewhere along the line again. And when I say most of them, I mean over half. So it's a pretty good educated guess if a person gets into a gunfight with a cop and ends up in prison over it, that this guy, he doesn't have too many qualms about taking somebody else's life, if you will. And he had charges about providing illicit things to minors, also selling these things around a school. So you got to think that this guy was bottom barrel criminal at the very least. Bottom barrel. And there may be a dozen years since that happened. But like I say, the chances of it happening or something happening with this type of a criminal is pretty, they're repetitious in what they do. Their mind runs different than a good, what we would consider a good citizen. Yeah, I feel bad. I got fooled. And I ate crow. I'm not eating crow this time. I guess I'm pissed that I fell into that little trap, though. Whew. Well, Megan, I'm glad you got on there and showed what you have there, because now I'm going to give you my little spin on this whole thing. And you probably won't like it. It's not that far off from yours. But I have a lot more experience than you do at looking at people having hired and fired and looked at thousands of people over the years, eyeball to eyeball, or listened to their stories. This time, I'm thinking about it a little bit. Now, all that stuff you brought up, to include the telephone messages back and forth, emails or whatever you want to call them, text messages. If you notice, most of it's about money. Money started the argument between the two, didn't it? GoFundMe account. Does that surprise you? You know, birds of a feather. Does that surprise you? A woman that seems to know about telling the police not to check her plates on her car. Does that surprise you? Woman that cries foul when they don't follow every little lead that they want. Does that surprise you? Do you think there might be a little bit of background there somewhere? Megan, before I would make too big of a splash holding this person up, I think I would look at her background close. And I'm not asking you to put her name out or anything like that, and I'm not going to ask it because I don't want to get accused of doxing somebody. That's not my bag. I got involved in this thing some time ago, and I was quite frankly on Jeremy's side. And the biggest break I had to get away from this Jeremy was when the child was brought into the spotlight. When those ants were brought up and put on his channel. And I started looking at their background. And then I knew it was hands off for me, because I would not want a child in that background as well either. And so here goes another jump in the fire, jump out of one fire and into another from what my standpoint was at that time. When you make a quick move without knowing the circumstances all the way around, you're bound to make some bad ones along the line. And over the years, I've made enough of them. And it seems since I've got involved in this darn thing, I've been drawn into a lot more of them. I don't particularly care for the drama. the way it's been handled and the way it's being handled by just about everybody concerned. And 3 or 4 times I said, I won't come back and look at it again. And I look at the foolishness out there, and damned if I don't get right back in there and say something about it again. You know, when I made that thing about Wes, put that thing up there, that video, and had all those haters coming after me because I spoke too quick. I wonder what they think about it now. And I notice they say, well, it's not my fault. Or, you know, I'm talking about me, but everybody out there, it's not their fault. Okay? They got scammed by him. He got them. He got the best of them. He had a bad background, but that's okay. He's a scammer now. The woman was down there that wouldn't cooperate with the police. All of a sudden wants to cooperate with the police, but money had to be involved first. A small amount of money to beat. I mean, sounds too good to be true. We're talking about a person while they're talking, they do a lot of ands, ohs, and they wait between words a long time before they get to the next one. That in itself, when a person is searching that close for words, it tells me that there's probably a little bit of a problem in memory or exaggeration or something along that line. Tells me that the person may not be a very good liar. That's what that tells me. And I realize that you guys have already jumped on the bandwagon and said, oh, those stories correlate. Well, one of the things I'm trying to figure out is, she said they went down the road to look for a place to turn around and then come back up. And then that put him on the side of the, where they were facing the property over there, Miss Preston's property. And I was thinking that he had drove past and backed up because he heard the noise when he drove past, drove back to find out what they were saying. And that's not exactly how she put it. Close, but not, it really wasn't exact. Now, I also understand this. I faced a loaded gun more than once, pointed at me. I'm a grown man, and I'm going to tell you something. Back then, I was a big guy. I wasn't fat like I got when I got older. I was a big guy with muscles. And not afraid of much, but I'm going to tell you what I am afraid of. When a gun was pointed at me, the adrenaline flowed. And I'm sure my eyes were about ready to bug out of my head the first time it happened. Being trained in the military doesn't make you ready to face down something like that. You do get used to hearing the bombs go off or the bullets go over your head or seeing tracers and the whoosh when artillery is going way over the top of you. You get used to that. But you never get used to a gun pointed right at you where you're right there facing man to man. The few times I've had to face something like that scared the dickens out of me. And things go squirrely because you can't really remember everything. All you know is your heart starts pumping and you're scared to death and you're so close you can't run. Now, the first time that happened to me, like the dummy I am, I went after the guy and I clobbered him. I knocked him down, but when he come back up, he had a pistol in his hand yet. And that time, he was going to kill me. Now, as it was, he backed out the door and it was gone. That was in my younger days. I don't know what would happen to me today if somebody pulled a gun on me, but I know that I would have a hard time remembering all the details. Whenever your adrenaline beats to that point, you imagine things that aren't happening a lot of times. Even the description of the person. A lot of times you don't know what they look like. That's how bad that shakes you up. Now, the stories about the actual facing it down, now this guy is quite a ways away. And in that circumstance, I wouldn't have been scared. I can tell you right now, I'd have drove like the Dickens out of the way, got out of range, and I would have been on the 911 call immediately. There was no two ways about it. I wouldn't have thought of anything else at that point, especially if I had a woman and a child in the car with me. Their stories, it's hard for them all to correlate together, okay? They're just a little off, just enough. And I think the officers down there that listen to the cases, listen to these people talk, probably felt that there was more to it than what they were listening to. And they were probably wondering why they had uncooperative witnesses, because I would wonder. I'd wonder more when they got home and they called up and said, I want to come down and testify, and they found out that these two are fighting over money. I'm just wondering, what the background is in that person. Like I say, I'm just wondering. And my opinion is just that. I've had a lot of experience with dealing with people, and it's very easy to force them out. You can ask questions that put enough pressure on them if they're willing to sit with you long enough that you're going to get a little better story out of it. Not over the telephone, you won't. But you will when you're eyeball to eyeball with somebody, when you see how they're moving, what their eyes look like, the twitches in their face, the movements in their fingers, the way they're sitting. There's a lot of tells on a person when they're lying to you. But when they're talking to you, there's certain hesitations between words that you hear, and you wonder what they're thinking next, because they're fishing for a simple word. Why is that? They're not scared anymore because they're not there with the witness. The witness can't get to them. Just things to think about. Now, Megan, I know you made up your mind already, and that's fine. I hope you go back over it and look a little more careful. I don't know how many more videos you'll put up to talk about it. I'm almost certain our friend Jeremy will put his up there, and his will be the most believable because he's the best at spinning a story. He's been doing it a long time. He's got experience with it, and it'll come out in his favor no matter what happens. He's like a cat with 9 lives, so he's going to spin it. But Megan, I'm hoping that you're smart enough to go back over all that stuff and look at it. Now, I also know, I mean, you guys have already spun it out to where it's not your fault for getting taken in. If I'd have been able to sit down with that young fella for about 15 minutes, I'd have figured him out pretty darn quick, I can tell you that. You guys had more of an opportunity to go over his stuff than I did. I jumped on there too quick and was ready to roast him, and admitted it the next day, and I find out that I was right about the thoughts I had on him. And now you guys are coming back with this story, and you're spinning it so that all this thing is Wes's fault, and this woman's coming forward now, the one that was uncooperative in the beginning, all of a sudden is cooperative. And here another child is involved in there, and she just wanted what was best for the child. She keeps bringing up the child's name. And that sounds familiar because he did the same thing. And you guys start groveling as soon as the child's name is brought up, and you zero in on the same thing. That's called blowing smoke when the witness does that. But I thought you had more maturity than to do it that way. Pretend like that child isn't involved. And I want you to go back over that story again. Like I say, pretend like there's no children involved right now. Just go back over it. Think of it as all adults. Go into it in detail. Also look at the two stories in detail. And just put the differences down. Now, if they're identical to the letter, that is a big tell. That's a real big tell. I don't know how else to go over this with you guys. I wasn't going to get on here today, and I wouldn't have if I hadn't seen what was put up there on the internet for everybody, because the whole thing is still there to take Mr. Cook down. I mean, that's the intent. And so they're going from one person to a different one to do the same thing. They're still after the same intent. And I'm just hoping that you haven't jumped so quick that you're going to have another one bite you in the butt. Which brings me to Lloyd or Floyd or whatever his name is. I know you're already aware that he's under suspicion for another felony. And then he does have a conviction out there behind him as well. And you're going to use the fact that he's a veteran to pat him on the back for everything he's going well. You don't mind jumping on this veteran. I don't have any felonies in my background. I know you guys love to bring drama in. You like to mix in your four-letter words. You know, it used to be that the only reason people, of course, I'm a different generation than you are. People who had to use four-letter words were lacking vocabulary. They didn't have a good concept of the language they were speaking at the time. Amazingly, when you learned another language, if you didn't learn it actually in school, the new language, you learn the cussing first a lot of times. Oh, well. I realize that you guys like to swear for the dramatization of it. If that's your bag, okay. You know, what can I say? That's just your way of doing things. Not mine. But I would ask you to go back and look at this whole thing again. And before you get too deep into Lloyd or Floyd, I would ask you to look at that thing a little bit closer too. There's a lot of little nuances you left out that everybody did. You know, that's one that could come back and bite you. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes if it does. Life will suck if it comes back on you, I can tell you. I know there's some things coming up. Tonight there's going to be another one. Jeremy's going to put one up there that's going to open everybody's eyes up like he's done in the last couple of weeks. He's opened everybody's eyes up. And daily there's a new one up there. And some of it's old hash warmed up again. I know you all like to hear it, talk about it. Gives you fresh fodder to talk about. You get up in the morning, you're thinking about it, and you're talking about it when you go to bed at night. Oh, yeah, and I did thank that person out there that I was, like I say, I was looking at your channel for information and never made any comments or anything. But I did notice there's somebody in there that wanted to comment about me being a Jeremy hater. You know, I've never said I really hate Jeremy. I don't like the way he does business. That's what I don't like. But you guys would paint me with a different picture, and I'm surprised at how many of these Kool-Aid drinkers put words in my mouth. You must think I'm some kind of a fool, and the only foolish thing I can think of is I fell into the listening to you guys a couple of times and went on there and apologized for something I thought when I was actually right, and you guys were wrong. Well, my apologies. Not today. Not today. But I would ask you, backtrack a little bit, look it over, and tell me if I'm still thinking wrong. At least look at my side of it when I'm looking at these little things. I've jumped too quick a couple of times, and I don't plan on making any more mistakes like that. What I'm putting to you are questions not necessarily conclusion. I've told you what I've got as far as experience in looking at stuff like this. And what I see out there is not very pleasing. And the birds of a feather seems to go with this. And when people collect this type of people around them and they become your witnesses, that makes me begin to wonder about the people that are doing the collecting. Especially when they've got the power to go out there and look at backgrounds and they're jumping so quick they're not doing that. And then when they find it out, they spin it so that the mud doesn't fall on them. That makes me wonder about the honesty in the whole thing. So I've thought better about some of you that are involved in this. And in my mind, the reputations are really slipping bad. And even though I started out as a neutral person, it's harder and harder to look at both sides as we go along, because even to this day, I've tried to look at both sides. And to this day, the people that have done the best about bringing forward real witnesses and documentation are two Lees in a pod. And you guys can't wait to get on the line and start calling them names. And I'm not sure why. Well, with that, I'm done for today. Please have a decent day. Don't get so upset about things that it makes you go crazy. I know that poor guy over in Vet Nation or Veterinarian Nation, whatever, he went absolutely nuts over Bruce. Look, and I know it. He's got problems. I realize that. Not Bruce I'm talking about. I'm talking about the guy over there. What's his name, Arthur? Oh, boy. Goodbye. Everybody out there have a good day, will you?